you mentioned the power of a network and mentors there, and that's how we were able to be connected. We're both part of, we went to the founders events. So shout out to Dan, to Mel, to AJ. Thanks for connecting us. And they're so important, right? Like meeting people who are going through that struggle and getting, advice and sharing. Sometimes just like a sounding board, just a vent, and because there's so, look at all the people in the world, and then people that have started a company in tech in London. It's a very, very small world, right?
Not that many people.
So it's so valuable to share ideas and insights with those individuals.
Yeah.
Do you also do much like reading and like self-study as well as like learning from other people? Do you do any like independent research to try to learn more about sales, product, company, investing, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit embarrassing, to be honest, but I don't read books very much these days. I mean, that's partly because I'm so busy with the startup and, having a few kids. But I do read a ton of blog posts, and, on Twitter or X and LinkedIn. That's how I like to consume kind of and stay fresh on, product methodology, sales methodology, what's going on in the startup world, what other startups are doing, because there's so much that you can inspire yourself on. But ultimately, reading is really important. But I do feel like the community, learning from others, is actually, something that I learn a lot more. Because I think the problem is, and I guess a book is probably the other way of doing it. I just maybe don't have too much of the patience for it. But, there's knowing that something is interesting, and then there's actually knowing how to do that thing. And when you talk to founders, they can walk you through, okay, here's how I did it. And that's a bit different than, just reading about it superficially. But I do find that just, being on Twitter, for example, and just reading what every kind of VC founders in London kind of write about, talk about, that first, it gives a sense of community, even if you don't really interact, daily or even at all. But it does make you kind of understand what people are thinking about, what are the latest thing that people are doing. And that's quite useful because in startups, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything, You really just have to reinvent the wheel in the one thing you're solving for your customer. But for a lot of other things, hiring, retention, product, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. You can look at what others do it, and you need to think critically, well, does that work for us? Because, we're a different kind of business. We're growing at a different way. We don't have as many people, but you can still, talk about it and understand the playbook there.
I'm with you on reading. I used to read like a book a week religiously, and then I had a kid, man.
Exactly.
So,
I used to read a lot, but then I don't know. But a kid changed thing, and by the time it's realistically, I could read in the evening, but by that time, I just want to go to bed and start my day early and get working on the startup. So, and frankly, I'm also woken up early by the children, so. But I'm looking forward to the day where I can again kind of have the sort of mental bandwidth to read because, when I worked at Go Cardless, I was reading like 0 to 1, the hard thing about hard thing, and all these books around startups. And
that's weird. I interviewed somebody called Merva Iqbal the other day, an entrepreneur who runs an electric vehicle delivery company. I asked her for her book recommendations, and she literally said 0 to 1. And the hard thing about hard things.
That's funny. I love both. That's why they came to mind because I read them 10 years ago. But they're still there and they're really good. And I also was reading things like Spin Selling on selling methodology. And I wish I had more time to read. And I feel a bit embarrassed because sometimes you talk to other founders and they're real bookworm and they're talk about so many books. And I'm thinking, well, I read a long blog post the other day and that was good for me. But I'm looking forward when I have a bit more, mental bandwidth to do that.
I'm like 99% audible consumption now because, it's just like a much less friction way of doing it. I can listen whilst I'm doing something with the kid or whatever. But what about on X, on LinkedIn, on blogs, on podcasts, on whatever? Is there anything in particular that you're listening, reading, any blogs that you're following, any people on X that people should be following? I guess more targeted for entrepreneurs, people in tech. What who inspires you? Who are you learning from?
It's a good question. I think, to be honest, I think I just kind of absorb from the general London or startup scene. I don't really focus on it.
Following or for you? Which tab are you on X?
I'm mostly on, well, I'm on both. I alternate a lot between the two. I'm not someone who, I don't know. I just recognize we're all human. And some people are doing some really impressive things, in a moment in time. But frankly, you just can learn from so many people if you don't obsess about, one way of doing things or one way of kind of thinking. And I just like to follow a lot of different ways and stay curious about different ways people are approaching problems. So I don't really follow a specific blog or a specific group of people. But as soon as I see that someone is interesting or someone is talking, I tend to follow them, mostly to kind of broaden the horizon. And funnily, that's been working out well because I think the danger with that is you might get caught up a bit on like the hype sometime if you're kind of in that bubble. But I don't think I mostly just go on Twitter and just click on like different things and what people are talking about. And there's a lot of Gen AI right now, but that's my way of absorbing kind of knowledge and content.
Yeah, I'm the same. If I had to look at the phone usage, it's probably like the entire thing, X, then like Notion, YouTube, and then calls. And
no, I spent too much time on X. I should really, and people in the last year say, it's all going down. I don't think so. It's where I learn about anything startup related. Really, I mean, LinkedIn is just corporate bragging.
It's okay, but it's nowhere near as cool and interesting as
that's
X,
the
right?
thing. Yeah, when you want cutting edge, X is just much better. And it's so cool that you can follow people from San Francisco working on the latest thing. You can also work on the entrepreneur, like really in London, working on a specific topic. And I think you can learn from both. Whether you can apply it to your startup tomorrow, that's a different matter. But you can actually learn about it and wrap your head about it.
So in 2021, you tweeted, speaking of X, as a startup founder, you never really let anything slide. Not really. It always stays in your head.
Yeah. Gosh, if my employees listen to this podcast, they're going to be worried. Yeah, man. I mean, you obsess about everything and you just can't really let go. I mean, you do ultimately, but you have a high bar because you care, right?
Yeah.
And you're also terrorized of failing or like that little thing you let slide, like snowballing into the thing that will kill your startup, right? Yeah. Like it's this thing that only the paranoid survive. And
who said that?
I think it was quoted by Dominic Cummings, but I don't know if it's him who actually said it.
No, it's definitely not Dominic Cummings.
I think is it the first Intel boss?
It's one of like the OGs of the Valley or something. I can't remember who it was, but it's a great quote, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's true. Like you got to obsess. Death can come in 1,000 ways, and actually often it's not one big way, right? Yeah. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. And I think the other metaphor that people do is startups. They tend to drown. Like they just have too much, and there's too much coming from all sides, and they're not able to cope. And you just have to be paranoid. And the way I kind of internalize that is you can't let things slide, because if you normalize something that's average or mediocre or slow, well then that's the tendency of the world. Like is this thing that everyone just wants to do it in a way that's easier and in a way that's less work. And sometimes that's good, by the way, because, like, for example, ChatGPT, there's so much now that used to be a bit laborious that you could do very quickly, and that's smart. So it's not always bad to be lazy or to want to make your life easier. But I find that, there's just so much gravitational pull towards mediocre or just kind of okay. And as a founder, you just can't allow that to happen, because by default, the world doesn't want you to exist. By default, the world wants you dead, because you're taking someone's market and you're taking a big company, shareholder value or whatever. So it's not like the world is waiting for you and wants to be nice with you. They actually don't care about you. And except for your customer who are paying for your service, they don't love you, right? Yeah. And so you can't just let things slide. I mean, you have to pick your battles. Like you can't just be on every front, because you then also will die. But you have to maintain a high bar on everything. And when you can't, you have to park it keep it in your mind and then come back to it later when you actually, might have more time or more money to actually do something about it. So I don't think you actually let anything slide. There's like things we built in our product 6 years ago that are I'm still worried about because we haven't fixed it or we haven't like improved it. And it's never going to go away from my mind. I don't actually have a great memory generally, but for like product and money, like I've got a lot of memory. I remember everything because it's so important to the product working and the company working. So yeah, I don't think you actually let anything slide. I think the one thing to be careful is you need to let something slide so you can sleep at night. But
Sure.
beside that, I think it never really goes away. Yeah.
One of your company's values is V1 then iterate.
I really love that. Like
that's really cool. I mean, you got a couple, but that's the one that really stood out to me. Tell me a little bit about that.
And it's funny because I think it's the one that's a bit unique to us. I think the other are very, you look at a lot of startups or companies in general, you'll find them, but that one is really core to our company. And I think and I came at it from different angle, and there's this kind of dichotomy between evolution and revolution. Do you like evolution, like the British model, or do you like revolution, like the French model? You just kind of remove everything, put something new. And I'm actually more on the evolution side, and that's where this value comes from. I feel like a lot of how great things get built. I mean, there's always a V1, and with the iPhone being released, speaking of Steve Jobs, but a lot of the greatness in a product come actually from the continuous improvement, listening to the customer and taking that feedback loop and making it better. And I think that's why that's really core to how I approach problem. And I'm very skeptical when people say, oh, this feature or this feature isn't working. Let's just remove and rebuild it from scratch. And it'll be like, hunky-dory, beautiful world, they'll be perfect. I don't trust that. Like my wool like gets up when I hear that, because I really believe actually, that kind of blue sky thinking is going to be amazing. It often doesn't work. And what works is listening to the customer and then doing the hard work of actually thinking, okay, what are they doing right now with those features? What are the problems they're trying to solve? And how do we make it incrementally better so that we solve their problem? And also the beauty with V1 then iterate is iterating is much faster typically. You actually can get something useful to your customer in 2 or 4 weeks. Whereas if you do, a big revolution, big bang, it's going to be a brand new feature. It's going to take you 3 months. And then because it's been in your head and then you put it out there, you don't actually know if it's good until the customer tells you, yeah, this is good and I'm using it. So it's also high risk for a startup. And sometimes it's necessary to take that risk. Sometimes, when you get started, you obviously have to build the V1. And sometimes something might be really broken and you just need to start from scratch. Or sometimes there's a new business opportunity and you need to build something new. So it's going to happen. That's why it's not just then iterate, right? It's V1, then iterate. But that iteration is fundamental on how I approach, I guess, business. It's just making sure to have the feedback loop. Because I think how I kind of explain it to the team is basically until a user is using a feature, it doesn't exist. Like it's in your head, it's it's on your local machine or whatever. But as long as the customer is not actually using it, it's not useful, right? Like the definition of useful is it's being used. So until you get that into your customer's hand, it's just not going to be something that's useful. So the shorter you can shorten the loop to get that feature to the customer, the better. So I think the other book I didn't mention is the lean startup with the MVP approach.
Eric Weiss, great book.
It's a great book, but we don't really use the MVP approach. I mean, I don't love using the MVP kind of terminology because I think it needs to work.
Sure.
And I think the MVP is sometimes too much. I think there's also this advice that you should launch something that you're a bit ashamed of. And I think I agree with that. But you still need to think through the core use case of your customer. And it needs to work for that core use case. Because I mean, there has been time where we ship something so fast that actually it doesn't really do the thing that the customer needs. And then that's not very useful either. So you do have to make sure you're actually hitting the brief in terms of what your customer is trying to do. But yeah, that value is, I think, my favorite, and I think the most unique, and one that actually, when we hire people, we have to kind of coach people, because if you hire people with a high quality bar, they're going to be a bit perfectionist, and they don't always love this value, you know. It doesn't, and you got to be also careful that it's not interpreted as, hey, cut corners all the time.
Yes.
You know, it's just that focus on delivering what is useful quite rapidly and then taking it from there.
Well, you mentioned the iPhone. When that released, there was no app store.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fine, right?
Yeah, and great. Exactly. Then they iterated. And now look at it.
Yeah, no,
Great.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and they still did the basic right. You could phone, you could text, you could, you know, read your email. And they did that very well, because that was kind of at the time what people expected. And so you still need to kind of, your V1 needs to be good enough to fulfill kind of your customer's use case. But you need to then iterate after that. And that's where the real value actually, I think, come from. If the iPhone had stayed what it was in 2006 or 7, it'd just be another phone. But because they've built all those amazing things around it, then now it's, you know, a whole platform, basically. And so the iterate is super important. And the company needs to be kind of thinking about the iteration, right? Because it's a cross-team effort. Like, the dev don't always talk to the customer, but you need customer success, you know, product and the devs to all be on board with, you know, once I've shipped this, is still my problem. Like, I got to make this better now and more useful. It's not just, oh, well, we've shipped it, it's done now, let's move on. So it does require kind of a different mindset for everyone.
I've been advising a company recently, which is it's sort of like Netflix, but for fitness sort of thing.
Yeah.
And having this exact same conversation with the founders, and they were saying, oh, look, Alfie, we need to, need to build out hundreds of videos and courses and programs, and we're going to spend years and hundreds of thousands building it, and then we'll launch.
Yeah.
I'm like, you could be wasting all of that money. People might receive it and it might not be what they want. Why don't you create something basic, you know, get a little bit of content on there and start giving out free trials or something in exchange for feedback. And then, and then the product after 1 year will be 10 times better.
Yeah.
Because the only way to really learn is to get out of your head, stop thinking like you know everything, and just get some actual feedback from people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there was that other business, I can't remember the name. It was these short videos. It was sort of a Netflix of like 6-minute video content.
Kwame or
Query something.
Yeah. See, the fact that we don't even remember it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
they raised millions. So
I mean, I think they spent $1 billion building up the content, and you know, I think they had Oprah on it, and they had like all these amazing.
Founder of, was it one of the execs from eBay or something, like ran it. They had like a really top tier team as well.
It was, everything was gold standard, right? Like, and they went big, and within a couple of months, I think they folded. You know, it's dangerous to spend a lot of money and then expect that the world will be, you know, there for your product. And I think as a primarily bootstrap startup, like, we never had that luxury. We just had to put things out there because we needed the customer to pay so we could pay our own bills, right?
Yes,
and that's a healthy discipline. I mean, in 2021, you know, when there was all the funding frenzy, you know, I felt like we were being a bit silly. But now, like, the world has shifted so much in 2023. You know, every day there's like someone saying, "Wow, I admire, you know, bootstrap startup," or "so capital efficient," you know, so efficient with your cash and all that. But and there's tons of problem that comes with that, I think. But one good thing is that you do have to put your products out there pretty rapidly and get the feedback, because you need the value to be quite quick for the customer, because that they're going to pay for value. And if you're not delivering, you're not going to have a business. There's no kind of VC money to hide behind. So for us, it's been you know, that value is also kind of from our business model as a bootstrap startup. You got to get your things out there, make sure they're valuable, and then, you know, take it from there.